So this week on Behind the Headlines, we're taking a look at a story that just came out today in the Weekly, the result of 3 months of investigation into how the school district handled allegations against an English teacher at Paly. Those allegations were that he had a romantic relationship with a recent graduate who was 18, but that also he had cultivated this romance while she was still at Paly. I think it might benefit us first just to kind of go over who all the people are before we dive into talking about, first of all, why this is a story and some of the implications for the school district. Elena, tell us a little bit about who is involved in this story and who we're going to be talking about.
Sure. So this is involving a Paly English teacher, Kevin Sharp, who some concerns were raised about him last fall in September by the parents of one of his former students, a female student who has since graduated, as you said. And we referred to her as Lauren in the story, so we can refer to her as that here too. And the parents brought concerns to an administrator at Paly, saying that their daughter had told them that she had engaged in a relationship with him after graduation. And they were concerned. They didn't want this to happen again, but they also didn't want her to be involved in an investigation. So that started in September and set off.
And who was the primary investigator at that time?
Scott Bowers, who's the school district's associate superintendent for human resources, took over and started a personnel investigation. And that decision was made because the parents said that they didn't want their daughter to be contacted or involved. So instead of launching, for example, Title IX investigation, which came later, the district decided to go with a personnel investigation, which is really against their own policies and procedures when these kind of complaints come forward.
Sure.
What is the big difference between a personnel investigation and Title IX investigation, just for a layman?
Well, personnel investigation is handled internally by the district and is into a staff member. Title IX investigation is involving complaints in this situation of sexual harassment that would have violated a student or multiple students' educational rights under Title IX, which is a federal civil rights law. So it investigates whether or not sexual harassment rose to the level of creating a hostile educational environment for the students involved.
Okay, so a different standard. Okay.
Yeah.
And a personnel investigation would be assessing whether an employee was meeting the standards laid out, standards of conduct and behavior in a general sense that the district has for them.
Okay.
So in addition to Kevin Sharp and Lauren's parents, this investigation encompassed Scott Bowers, the HR assistant superintendent, Kim Diorio, the Paly principal, the former boyfriend of Lauren, whom we called Sean, and 2 law firms. One was Fagan, Friedman, and Fullfrost. A particular attorney there that is mentioned in our story is Chad Graff, and then Lou Lozano, who is the other primary district law firm. Now, the question that some people would raise is that the relationship that occurred over the summer was between Lauren, who was 18, and Sharp, who's definitely over 18. Why is this a story? Why isn't this just 2 consenting adults deciding to have a romance?
Well, a piece of it is definitely this concept of grooming behavior, which is defined by the Office for Civil Rights as desensitizing behavior. So it could be things as benign as going out to lunch, a teacher and a student going out to lunch, or something like special favors, paying special attention, inappropriate comments or compliments that can rise to the level of sexual harassment. And that sort of grooming behavior is what could lead to the consummation of a romantic or sexual relationship.
Kind of drawing somebody in
Exactly.
closer and paying attention to that person.
Yeah, so determining whether or not that actually happened and if that played a role in what did or did not happen after graduation, it was really important to determine, but also very difficult to determine when there were conflicting reports, a lot of he said, she said, and difficulty in getting to the bottom of what actually happened.
For the benefit of those who haven't fully read the story, so Kevin Sharp denied that there was a romance. Lauren would neither confirm nor deny that. and yet it was still investigated anyway. So the OCR, the Office for Civil Rights, has some standards, and those kind of play into what you were just talking about, that even when a relationship has been agreed upon by two consenting adults, there's the notion that somehow the attention was unwanted because of the power relationship.
Exactly, yeah. There's a line in an Office for Civil Rights guidance document that says, even if it is between two consenting adults, if it's a teacher-student relationship, the presumption is that something non-consensual occurred because of the nature of that dynamic.
Yeah. And certainly there's a broader concern that perhaps this relationship wasn't the first, or that there was a broader concern for other students. What came out in the reporting of this article that implied or confirmed that students had heard about it, or that there was some sort of ripple effect of the existence of a relationship?
There were certainly some rumors circulating at Paly, even some that came reported to a teacher after winter break, which caused Bowers to reopen his personnel investigation in February. So that was certain. You can imagine what goes on at a high school that was going on. And yeah, so there.
I think one of the
certainly
interesting
rumors.
things that you found was that Lauren learned, even though the parents said, we don't want Lauren to be involved in this, don't talk to her, or if you need to talk to her, let us know first. Lauren found out that this was going on as early as October. I mean, essentially as soon as her parents had come to report this to the district, Lauren found out about it through her friends, the rumor mill, perhaps through Kevin Sharp, and actually, according to her, sought an opportunity to tell her side of the story, and actually didn't have that chance until March, I think.
Yeah, she said that she emailed both Kim DiOrio, the Paly principal, and McGee when she found out in October, and really did want to share her side of the story, but didn't speak to lawyers until later in the spring when they were doing the Title IX investigation.
I think one question that readers probably have is, okay, Weekly, how do you know all this stuff? I mean, what was the process of trying to obtain information about this? What is the role of the Public Records Act, for example?
We filed several Public Records Act requests, I don't know how many I was going to count this morning, to solicit documents from these the Title IX investigation, the personnel investigation, whatever available documents that the district had and could provide to us, redacted, that we really relied on for most of this information, the timeline, and those documents continued to come out as we followed this throughout the past few months.
Don't organizations usually claim some sort of personnel exemption, though? So what, we can't talk about it, we can't release any information, everything having to do with employees and their behavior is completely, not in the public eye. What, maybe Bill, you can answer this question. What is the standard that we're dealing with here such that the district could release information to us?
Yeah, this, as some may recall, came up with the Phil Winston case, where there were members of the public that wondered how in the world was it that the information on Phil Winston's case was released to us in response to our Public Records Act request. And the law is pretty well settled in this area, and there are several court cases that basically have ruled that when you're balancing the right of an employee of a public agency's privacy against the public's interest in knowing of discipline investigations or discipline for misconduct, the scale is clearly tipped to favor public awareness. There have been several court cases. The one that is most recent was a 2012 case where that actually involved a high school math teacher who had been investigated 2 years earlier for sexual harassment of a student. The district had placed a discipline letter in that employee's file, very similar to what's occurred here, a warning notice saying that they had found that he had sexually harassed this other student, and that he was put on notice that if it continued, he would be fired. So almost identical circumstances in a legal sense. So a parent then learned of this later and put in a request to the district saying, I'd like the records of this investigation. And the court ruled, what was important about that case is that the court ruled that there was this that it had sort of established this process by which you could challenge ahead of time the release of information, but it reaffirmed the correctness legally of the district's decision to release the information. So the court basically said in these cases, that information about an investigation of misconduct, as long as it's not a completely frivolous allegation, if there was substance to the allegation, whether it was founded or not, whether there was a finding of guilt or what have you, that document should be a public matter.
In this case, neither Sharp nor Lauren objected to the release, but what grounds would they have objected based on? How could
Well,
they
the process is, and this happened in our case, the district said, we believe this is public information, and according to the previous court cases, we will provide you with this information, but not until we've notified the parties that we're about to do this. So if they had chosen to go into court, what they would try to convince a judge of is that the circumstances didn't meet the standards established by the previous court cases.
Public interest.
And that in fact their privacy interests were greater. The likelihood of that succeeding in a case like this where the district has already imposed discipline would have been next to zero, I would think. But in any case, they chose, neither Sharp nor Lauren chose to do that.
Okay.
You brought up the Phil Winston case, and obviously a lot of the circumstances are different in the specifics, but I was wondering if there are any details in how the district handled it or parts of this investigation were sort of reminiscent of that.
Yes and no. The way the district chose to handle the Phil Winston case was similar to this initially in that they treated it as a personnel matter. There never was a Title IX investigation done or a UCP investigation done. That's the Uniform Complaint Procedures that guide the district's process when a sexual harassment allegation is made. And in the Phil Winston case, they did a very similar investigation that Scott Bowers conducted, and he prepared notes of that investigation, but no formal report.
Right.
And
Same
based on
here.
those notes, the district placed a letter of finding in his file and gave to him, somewhat similar to the way they way they ultimately handled this case. The big difference is that the district never, in Phil Winston's case, conducted the kind of in-depth legal investigation to determine the Title IX sexual harassment aspects of it and its effect at Palo Alto High School.
Yeah, there's a couple things that I want to touch upon. One of which is just the internal disagreement that was apparent in some of the emails that we saw between Kim DiOrio and McGee/Scott Bowers over how to handle Kevin Sharp's continued teaching tenure at Paly.
Yeah, Kim DiOrio pretty early on, I think in the fall, was insisting that she really felt that Sharp should be placed on paid leave, at least while the investigation went forward. And it sounded like she expressed that desire multiple times, and it didn't happen for various reasons.
Yeah, and then Scott Bowers talked with Sharp. There were notes taken from that meeting. It seemed like the personnel investigation kind of went nowhere by the end of last year. There was an indication via email that there was nothing to be done because Sharp had denied it and Lauren wouldn't talk, despite the fact that she had emailed McGee and the district. So just to kind of bring readers along, so that will lay fallow for a month or two, and then we get to the Title IX investigation.
Right.
And how did that come about?
So in January, apparently a a Paly teacher had a conversation with a former student that mentioned the allegations, and this reignited Bowers' personnel investigation, and he talked to more members of the English department at Paly and also some school counselors to gather more information. And then a week or two after he resumed his investigation in February, Kim DiOrio received an email from Sean, the former boyfriend of Lauren, detailing his concerns not only about Sharp and keeping Sharp on campus, but also really about how the district had handled the allegations that had come in months before, and him criticizing the district pretty strongly about their delay in taking any action. And that just added fuel to the fire, I think, of them realizing that something needed to be done, and the Title IX investigation was launched.
Yeah. So this is a great point at which to say that, for those people who are wondering why, for one thing, why is the Weekly writing about this, but also why is the district looking into this? It's because there was kind of an unresolved investigation in the first part. There was no findings that were then reported back to Lauren's parents. It just was kind of went sort of nowhere and was picked up. And then new concerns had emerged.
Right.
How long did the firm Fagan, Friedman, and Full Frost look into the allegations? What did they do as part of the Title IX investigation?
They interviewed most people involved. I think they're required to interview anyone who might have any relevant information. So they interviewed Lauren, Sean, Kim DiOrio, district administrators, Paly staff members, Kevin Sharp, and they did that throughout the spring, and then in early June sent a report to the district detailing their findings, what they concluded about two different allegations, which was that either that Sharp groomed the student, and then that a sexual relationship was consummated after graduation. And they basically determined that there was insufficient evidence, and they couldn't conclude that anything on either allegations had happened. And that was really striking, particularly because of text messages, which are brought up in the story, that Sean, the former boyfriend, had shared with Bowers in March. And there's screenshots of text messages with him and Lauren talking about Kevin Sharp, and she acknowledges that they were seeing each other after graduation. These text messages aren't mentioned in the personnel investigation or the Title IX investigation or the notice of unprofessional conduct that was later sent to Sharp in late July.
Even though Bowers and Fagan Friedman and Lou Lozano had the texts.
Yeah, so that's sort of a remaining mystery of their absence in all of those reports, and as the only physical direct evidence of what's going on, then that could bring some clarity to all the conflicting reports from people involved.
One of the interesting things about the text messages is that, as I recall, Superintendent McGee said he didn't know about the text messages until the first week in August, approximately.
So before school started.
Right, before school started, which was long after they'd been sent to Bowers and to the Fagan law firm.
Yeah, it seemed like there was some lapsed communication that was going on. So what transpired in June and July is really kind of the crux of this story, the investigation that we did, which was Fagan Friedman came to one conclusion: the district had done a great job in following Title IX procedures. Kevin Sharp was in the clear, as it were, and then Lou Lozano drafted with Scott Bowers the notice of unprofessional conduct. And so then that, maybe you can pick up the story, that kind of laid out to him warnings and criticism of his behavior.
Yeah, so that was sent to Sharp on July 21st, so I think it was about 6 weeks after the Fagan, Friedman, and Full Frost conclusions were reached. And they basically said, well, an earlier investigation determined that they couldn't determine anything happened. We believe that the evidence has greater credibility than your denial of the allegations. So they sent him some warnings, some directives, and that you could be subject up to and including dismissal as further discipline if you don't follow these directives. And I think he was probably shocked by that. He had been told he was quote-unquote exonerated. That's what his lawyer said in June when the Title IX investigation came back. And then he got this letter unannounced in the mail, and apparently was never met with or was explained what the rationale behind that letter.
So for him, it was just a 180 on the district's part with no particular reasoning that he could figure out.
One of the interesting things between these two reports or two actions by the two different law firms is that in the letter of notice on unprofessional conduct, it's not a long letter. It's two pages versus 13 pages for the graph report. But what the district lays out very clearly in that 2-page letter is the determination that they made on credibility. And you just described what their conclusion was, that the allegations, the people that were making the allegations, their version was more credible than Kevin Sharp's version. The law firm really never made a credibility determination in their report. They basically outlined the conflicting stories and explained what those stories were, but they never then went to make that all-important determination of, well, who are we going to now, as we weigh that, who do we give the most credibility to in making a judgment?
One thing that I think parents especially are concerned about is the continued tenure of a teacher when there are some suspicions. And the idea of termination or dismissal, did that come up in the investigation, or why wasn't this just an automatic, thank you very much, here's your notice, and you're not teaching here anymore?
I didn't speak with anyone specifically about that, but I think there was this element of she was over 18, she was a consenting adult, so nothing technically illegal happened. So obviously if she had been a minor, that would be a different story. But I'm not sure. I mean, it's about.
I want to make sure that we make a distinction here between illegal behavior, which would be a criminal matter, and behavior deemed inappropriate and unpermissible, which you can be fired for. So there's not a threshold that requires illegal behavior for the school district to fire an employee. I think the answer to your question is that we just don't know. One school board member, Ken Dauber, I think told you that in his opinion he should be terminated. But it's unclear whether that discussion has already taken place and has reached some conclusion or not. That's all closed session personnel action, obviously. And all we know is, as of Elena's finishing up this week on this story, is that the district acknowledged that he is still an employee, he's on leave, and that's about it, right?
So what is the district able to do in terms of policy or procedure to address concerns of parents and students and teachers about behavior that may have been legal, but perhaps is questionable, something that was disciplined over? What are the policy issues that we're looking at now?
Well, Ken Dauber has also brought to BPRC, which is the school board's policy review committee, 2 proposals for consideration. One that would address grooming behavior and prohibit it, and another one that would increase Title IX training and education for staff members who are involved in these kind of investigations. There are a lot of requirements around how the district's Title IX coordinator needs to be trained, what they need to be knowledgeable in, far beyond the district's own policies, federal and state laws, and all of that. And not only the coordinator, but any staff member who should be required to report these kind of complaints and how to handle them and all of that. So there are these 2 proposed policies that could come to the board sometime this year. That's unclear if that'll happen. BPRC will vet that out first.
Okay.
The district has also started doing some training around these specific issues, around boundaries between teachers and students, how to investigate sexual harassment complaints. I think there was a session even just this week. So they're moving forward on addressing these kind of things.
Okay. There was a sidebar that went with the main bar, having to do with all the different legalities that I think is, personally, I thought is very helpful in understanding the difference between personnel investigations, this UCP, Uniform Complaint Procedures, complaint procedures, and Title IX investigations. And I'm just struck by the fact that the UCP, now that was adopted within the last couple of years.
Revisions to it.
Revisions to it. Yeah. And there was a loop back provision that the people who were complaining initially, and that was Lauren's parents back in September, should have been receiving some sort of results of the investigation. I think it was within 60 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem is it was never treated as a UCP investigation.
Yeah.
So none of the requirements that are there under their policies were followed.
Yeah. And that's one of those question marks. It's like, well, for the district, why it wasn't treated as a
I think
UCP.
that's, the problem for the district is that had they done that at the beginning, they probably would have satisfied both Lauren's parents and Sean if they had actually conducted a thorough investigation in accordance with the UCP, almost regardless of what the outcome of that investigation was. Because I think what your reporting showed was that the concern was eventually was as much about the lack of a proper response to the complaints as it was anything else. And instead, this thing dragged on. It's a year later now.
It's a year.
And it's still unclear what's going to happen.
Yeah. And Kevin Sharp is on leave, and no action has been taken in his employment that we know of. So, any other questions or did anything surprise you in this story?
Well,
Probably a lot that surprised us in this story.
Yeah.
I'm sort of intrigued by the fact that the school district is now exploring this kind of a policy prohibiting romantic relationships after a student graduates. I have serious questions about how this would be enforced, about are there going to be
And when this first came up, actually in May, Ken Dauber brought it a different policy than what he's proposed now, but proposing to limit teacher-student relationships for a period of up to 4 years after graduation. And one of the district's lawyers responded at that meeting saying, that would be problematic, but there's always this question of what happens when a relationship immediately blossoms after graduation, and how can a school district respond to that?
Maybe reduce 4 years to 6 weeks. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the answer.
How do you enforce something like that? You're going to have school board investigators following people on dates, taking pictures.
And that time limit is no longer on the cutting board, but that was how it first came up.
Yeah. To address the hostile environment that it creates for other students.
Yes, that too, exactly, with rumors and all of that, and concern about being in a teacher's class.
I was actually kind of surprised that the first report from the Friedman, that firm, the biggest concern, according to its findings, was all the rumors going around. That was kind of the big consequence of this, which kind of struck me as...
Well, and they really called out Paly Principal Kim Diorio for even suggesting that Sharp be placed on paid leave, as Elena referenced earlier, which of all the things to focus on, that was surprising to see that in their report.
Yeah. Well, this has been a huge effort to get all the information together, thanks to the PERA, and so there's a lot of strands that are still kind of unresolved, and we will for sure be following up on those as they unfold. So. For all the latest news in Palo Alto, you can go to paloaltoonline.com or catch us on Twitter at Palo Alto Weekly. That's it for this week.